Hello, my name is Brad Bodnerchuk, and welcome to the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast, where we discuss everything hospitality, from the food on the plate to the teams that make it happen and the community that drives this industry forward. On this podcast, we sit down, chat with some of the most exciting, inspiring, and innovative minds that make up one of the most dynamic industry that there is today. And today, I have the pleasure of being joined by none other than Joanna Jagger. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I say this often on my podcast, but this time I mean it sincerely. I always say if you're on iTunes or Podbean or Stitcher and you're listening just to the audio version of this, when you get home, go over to YouTube and check out where we are today, because today we are sitting randomly in a park just down the street from my place. I thought because it was so sunshiny and it was so warm, and disclaimer, we have guests in town from back east, so our place is a little bit of a mess right now.
No,
so I thought this was easier than having you come to our quote-unquote studio.
This is perfect. Somebody told me once that if you live in a place like Vancouver, it's like you have a membership to a country club. You know, you pay as much as we do to live here, so you might as well use the amenities. And for Vancouver, that's our parks, our beaches, and you know, of course, our dining allowance of getting out to the fine restaurants. So
yeah, that's a great way to look
outdoors.
At it. Yeah. No, so I appreciate you making the time to come and share what it is you're up to with myself and with our audience. And I can't wait to find out more about you and why you do what you do and what you do. So let's just jump right into it. You are here obviously because we got connected through Piquant Marketing. Mm-hmm. We both did a Instagram takeover a few weeks ago, about a month or so ago. And I reached out to you, I think, almost immediately because I said, how do I not know that this exists? So Worth Association is women of recreation, tourism, and hospitality.
That's right.
And I feel like this is such a poignant conversation to have right now on this podcast, but also just in this space. So I was so intrigued to connect with you, find out more, and obviously host you on the podcast. So again, welcome, and please fill in the blanks. Let myself and listeners know, like, what is Worth Association? Why does it exist? How did it come to exist? When did it come to exist? All of those things.
Sure. So we're pretty new in this space, and I think that's the exciting part about what we're building as Worth Association. It was, for me, I recognized there was a big gap. So if you work in many industries, there's a Women in Leadership Association or some kind of space for women to come together. And I met with the CEO of the Minerva Foundation at the time, and she asked that question: why is there no association for women who work in the tourism or hospitality industry? And so I just set out to fill that. I was studying my master's in leadership a couple years ago, and I just thought it'd be interesting to do an event, bring together a panel. I called them the Beyoncés of our business, bring together these awesome women and have them speak on maybe barriers they've faced in their career, how they accelerated their leadership ambitions. And that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to do the one event. I was on mat leave. I was, just hoping to do this one project. And the response was so phenomenal. We had 50 people on the wait list. We had Tourism Victoria call us up. Whistler called us up, host these events. So we went on the road and we built this Empower Her network. And the response itself was so positive. And I think there was a hunger for this. And that's where we set out, incorporated as a society just about almost a year ago now.
Oh, wow.
And built our board in February, and now we're kind of off to the races for what we want to do in this space.
How has it, I ask this question to a lot of my guests, because a lot of my guests are creators, whether they're head chefs or restaurateurs or architects. So I always love to hear their reaction to when someone engages with their finished product. So when a chef, when he or she sends out that finished plate, like, what does that look like to them? How do they feel viscerally? What are the emotions they have? So now that Worth is seemingly up and running, it has steam behind it, there's some traction and people are intrigued. How do you feel about it? What emotions do you have when you see people coming together and creating a community and a platform for these conversations to be had? What are you feeling in your bones?
I feel so excited about it. I also feel a little overwhelmed by all the work we have to do and all the work ahead of us, because this is such an important conversation. And there have been a few women who've reached out to us and said, I negotiated a raise because of what I saw on your Instagram at Worth.association. You empowered me to go after that. And so those little moments for me are so propelling for what we're doing and what we need to continue to do. We have lots coming down the pipeline in terms of how we not only engage the community of women in recreation, tourism, hospitality, but also how we advocate and what kind of work we're doing really to make change. And that's where I get most excited about my efforts in terms of doing the research and having the numbers and having the power behind us to say things have to be different.
Right.
And this industry needs a lot of change in many areas, but certainly how women take a leading role. And we hear a lot about the labor shortage. That's a big conversation right now. And I feel personally there's a women shortage. We're not allowing enough women to take leadership roles and be really engaged in restaurants and hotels. And we see a lot of women exiting, especially a lot of women who want to have families or who can't navigate that balance that some of these places demand. And so with our advocacy efforts, we're trying to connect with the HR community, the general managers, the hotel associations, and just start to give ideas on how we could see a better industry and how we could engage more women and keep them motivated to stay and thrive and grow and help lead and help others, reach back and help other women jump into more senior roles.
I'm really intrigued. I have so many questions on this topic because I feel like for me, and I mean this sincerely, like meeting you today and having this conversation is important for everyone to hear. But selfishly, I want to learn a lot because I feel like, and this is where I'd love to hear some of your stats and numbers. I feel like we are making some headway when it comes to women in hospitality, women just in general in any workplace. I feel now their voices are being heard more than ever, which I think is an amazing thing. So from where I stand, which is a very easy position to be in, a white male born in Canada, I look at it like, hey, we are doing things, but to your point, there are still gaps, right? And I'm sensitive to that. But what I'm asking of you and others like you is keep doing what you're doing and help educate people like me, because I want to consume that education and I want to see what I can keep doing, whether it's having more people like you on the podcast, whether it's talking to restaurateurs that I deal with through my consulting work and helping them understand there is a gap when it comes to women in this space. So what are some of the other, you mentioned, and I know you brought some with you, and I'd love to hear them. Like, what are some of the numbers and stats you feel right now are imperative for us to be hearing through all of this vocabulary, more important than most? Like what stats should myself and others be aware of?
Well, it's so exciting to have men like you who are really open and excited about this movement, and having men that are part of the conversation. We need men part of the conversation. And, we know studies show that educated urban men are saying, 99.9% want to see equality. But when it comes to what will you do for that? Would you speak up if you saw harassment? Would you, vote for women in leadership roles or civic politics? And that's what we're not seeing. Men are 10 times more likely to be promoted to a senior role in our industry, 15.5 times more likely to be a CEO in the hospitality space. In fact, hospitality is lagging behind all other industries in the S&P 500 at developing women. So yes, gender equity is kind of a really hot topic in business, and 4 to 5 companies are committed to that. Hospitality, we're behind. We're not making that a focus. And I think, of course, there's a lot of reasons for that. We have small owner-operators in hotels and tourism and restaurants especially, and maybe they just don't have the time or the efforts able to kind of devote to this. So that's what Worth wants to fill. We want to make sure that we're doing the research and we're doing the work. We exposed a pay gap. We did some research with Tourism HR Canada, and it was funny. I phoned them up and I asked. I wanted to hear, what do you know about women in this space and the gender pay gap? And they said, well, no one's ever asked that before. I said, okay, let's get to work.
Yeah.
So we did some big study with them and analysts in Ottawa, and we exposed in Vancouver that women in restaurant management in the city make 88 cents to $1 that a man earns. And it's even worse in the hotel community, 77 cents. And tourism across the board in Canada, 67 cents. So, that just drives me mental, knowing that we have really talented women working just as hard in the same comparable roles. That in Canada, in Vancouver, are being paid that. So we went to the HR Association and brought this forward and said, this is your efforts. We need to be making that change. And it's as easy for some as opening a spreadsheet. It's not this big monumental effort. We really just need to be having that conversation. Women need to be aware. And it's interesting because, a lot of women are aspiring to move up in their career in this industry. More women say they want to reach the highest position as possible than men. And so, we're really trying to encourage that. And the number one reason they're saying they want to be that in that senior role is to be a role model to women.
Right.
So, I think that there's a lot of opportunity here to recognize there's a lot of stereotypes and myths around women and what they want and what they're able to achieve in this industry especially. There's a lot of, I call it like gender occupational segregation. We throw all these women and, you're going to be a hostess.
Right.
And that's your role.
Right.
And man, you're going to bus tables. And so we're kind of just backwards on how we look at this whole industry. And what we need to be doing is getting more women in supervisory roles and leadership roles and project-based roles so that they feel connected to not only the industry itself, but where they can go with it.
Do you feel a big piece of this just popped into my head? Because I know some very successful and very confident women in this space, so in the restaurant and hospitality space. And I know others that are a little bit more, for lack of a better term, like wallflowers. They're not the ones to scream and shout and kind of like make it known that they're in that space. So how much of what Worth does is giving women tools to kind of, and not everyone's going to be that. Not everyone's going to be that loud, boisterous leader. There's other types of leaders, and I'm aware of that. But does Worth have tools that you can give to young women or women of all ages that will allow them to kind of come into their own and recognize their worth and then somehow feel, not feel, but I guess have the right avenues and venues to like express that? If that makes sense?
Of course. No, we had a really neat event a few months ago called Inspire Her, and that was a student-led event. I'm an instructor at the School of Tourism at Capilano University, and a young student came up and said, Worth should do an event for students. I said, no, this is a leadership association. You should run an event for students. So we brought together young women for Inspire Her, and that was really the focus. And then we're building these seminars that allow women, just on the 24th of June coming up, we're doing an event called Negotiate Your Worth. So women are connected to an expert in negotiations. This was brought to us as maybe the number one issue that based on my stats I just shared, that women aren't maybe comfortable in that space. We know a lot of women are more hesitant to negotiate. They're more worried about the relationship and they worry the relationship could be damaged by asking for more or kind of...
Or establishing themselves as a leader.
Yes, of course. So, that's definitely what we want to build through, our events and programming, is just to have that space where women can learn from somebody who's an expert in what they're talking about, and then that can trickle down into their workplaces.
Why do you feel like our industry, you mentioned that we're essentially as behind as you can be in regards to comparing us to other industries? Why do we have such antiquated ways in our space? Is it because, like you said, we're quote unquote so busy and there's not enough bandwidth and time to devote to changing the mindset? Or is there some other attributes that you've either witnessed or that you can pontificate and share that you think this is what's holding us back? Or is it just conversations like this need to be had more in our space?
I think a little of that. Of course, the dialogue's important, but I started my career as a cook. So I did, I worked in a high school kind of apprenticeship program. I had this chef that was, we feared him. He was aggressive. He's kind of that very typical chef personality.
Like the throwing the pans,
totally.
And the Gordon Ramsay cursing.
Yes. And I was like 13 years old. And this is what my first exposure. And then I worked out of high school and university. I was continued to be a cook, work in kitchens. And I step back now and think it wasn't a terrible experience at all, but of course I'm not doing that today. I wonder if I had had different leadership styles around me, different mentorship opportunities, would I have continued? I don't think we have a lot of mentorship going on in the restaurants I'm aware of. I would love to hear differently from different environments, but I think that's an important element. And what I often think of, like, would you rather work for a Gordon Ramsay or would you rather work for like Nigella Lawson? Like, do you want to work for somebody
Right.
who is that toxic masculinity where it's competitive, it's aggressive, it's demanding, and that's what we've set up as like we've romanced that. We've put those guys on
Completely. I was
television.
just going to say that. I would. And this is not to be talking in jest. This is just again, I think, an issue with our society as a whole. And I'll speak just to North America. Like Nigella Lawson likely doesn't have as much staying power as Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay, what was it? Hell's Kitchen probably has more people watching it than Nigella making a cake. But they're polar opposites in regards to how they quote unquote run their businesses. But there's something, it's like a car accident. People slow down to watch it. There's something intriguing about that. I don't know why that is, but I think what we need to be aware of in our space, and also as consumers as well, who we're supporting, is that isn't okay. And it's not a long game as well. There's no long game there. And I think that's what I'm learning through this podcast and through my work with my clients is we need to be looking at ways that we can improve our current situation and not just put a band-aid on it, but create a solution today so that there is longevity to this industry, because we could go on with all of the gaps that are right now in our space, whether it's food costing or, like you said, labor shortages and now the gender inequality, all of these things. But we need to be having more conversations, and these conversations can't be left at this. Meaning you and I having this conversation today is amazing and it's great, and Worth Association doing these things is amazing, but we need to get a little bit punk rock, I think.
Yes.
And like, we're not leaving this room until there's a solution.
I love punk rock. That's great.
But do you know what I mean?
I do.
Whether it's supporting your local farmers or supporting your local businesses or finding ways to make gender equality pay in our industry, whatever it is, like let's sit in a room, let's brainstorm, and let's agree that we're not leaving until we have a solution. Because I feel like I've been to so many different events and seminars and symposiums where there's fantastic content and then everyone leaves and nothing changes.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
And I think there's choice now. And I think women coming up in the next generation, I truly believe that these movements globally, like Me Too and Time's Up, are empowering a generation to say, you know what, I'm just not going to work there. And restaurants in this town and, you know, across Canada, they have reputations.
Yeah.
And those reputations are loud. And I know of a restaurant in the West End that openly says we don't hire women behind the bar because women can't lift kegs and can't carry kegs. And I am an HR consultant. I'm a professional in the HR space, and I'm thinking, well, no, it's legal to use that kind of language and discriminatory hiring practices. But now that's known. Like, women know that your restaurant group has that kind of view. You're telling women at the door with their resume that they don't belong there. And so, the advocacy efforts we're doing is not to make employers scared, run away, or fear. We're just engaging them in the conversation. And what Worth is building also is just having Worth workshops where we go into businesses and we have conversations with the women and start having conversations about their leadership ambitions, what are some of the barriers, how to impact the culture. And none of that is negative. It's just really a positive. It's meant to drive more engagement and to kind of take a pulse check of the culture, and then empower these women to stay and to create a career that's going to be meaningful. And I think that's why we're backwards a little bit is in all industries, especially younger millennials, Gen Z, they're looking for flexibility. They're looking for a balance. It's more important to them. And we're going to have to shift the way we've been doing things to allow that balance and allow that flexibility. And I don't have all the answers to that. I really wish I did, but I'm mindful that if you can get a talented woman in your kitchen 2 days a week because she's a parent, she's in school, whatever it is, own that. Take that time because you never know what that could lead to. And developing women who might be students or may have other jobs, develop them and don't be afraid to invest in that talent because they will stay. They will, continue to help grow your business. They're going to be passionate about your business, and that's the kind of employee you want. So mentorship, sponsorship, the difference between mentorship and sponsorship is really having somebody that's talking about you. Mentorship might be behind closed doors, but sponsorship, we're working to push you forward. So, there's a lot of things that we could be doing in terms of shifting the conversation and kind of making noise, but I think it's going to be each woman and man that's a part of this business opening their eyes to what the reality is right now. And this is one small piece of how we make the hospitality industry succeed.
Can we highlight anyone that you feel right now is, whether locally or globally, is really using their voice from a male standpoint, really using their voice to advocate and assist what it is the hill you are choosing to climb up? Is there anyone right now top of mind that you're like, wow, he is really stepping up, or that corporation is really stepping up, that generally is a male dominant space? Is there anyone top of mind, or is everyone needing to do more?
I think we all need to do more, men and women. I know from the hotel side of things, I can think of Accor Fairmont Properties. What they're building is really powerful. A lot of male leadership, but they're bringing together conversations. They have set targets for advancing women into leadership roles. They want to see more female chefs, and so at corporate level, they're getting involved. There's other organizations that are signing something called the Catalyst Accord, and that's a commitment to gender equity in the workplace. The Minerva Foundation I mentioned, that's a provincial organization. They also have a pledge. And so there are some hospitality companies that are working towards that and also trying to be that best employer. A lot of the big restaurant chains, that's a big focus. And so their Cactus Club comes to mind of they're advocating in the space to have back of house bosses. So the women are featured.
Right.
Getting more women in their whites, in their chef's uniform, their faces out there so we can recognize that this is a really awesome career choice. We're doing an event called Yes Chef. Chef is spelled SHEF. And
Oh, cool.
I'm really excited about that because we're bringing together
Brilliant.
5 female chefs, 5 female sommeliers, and 5 female culinary student apprentices. So the students are going to be matched with 5 awesome, talented female chefs. And they're going to create a course. And we're hosting this at Shambar on August 12th. And that's going to bring together this idea of, let's allow women to pursue their passions, whether it's food or
So
wine.
cool.
And I want to feature these women that are, members of our restaurant community that may not get the airtime or the media attention than our friend, David Hawksworth, who's saying women should stay away from the kitchen.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but I kind of wanted to. Yeah.
No, we don't fault David for saying something like that. That just highlights the prevailing
the antiquated
attitude.
mindset.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if anything, he opened a discussion that needs to be had. And we had been planning this event for some time, but we recognized, we have to be pushing for more media attention for the women so that young women like myself years and years ago when I was in kitchens, I could have had those role models and had women featured that, and I have that opportunity to be mentored by one or paired with one. I think that's going to be the most special part of Yes Chef. It's getting the students from Vancouver Community College paired up. And
yeah, I think it's so forward thinking. It reminds me of the young agrarians right now that happens. I don't know if you know of that. So it's they're taking established farmers, and those farmers are becoming mentors for young agrarians, young farmers that are coming up, and they basically mentor them and teach them how to make it all work. And it's not an easy thing being a farmer, but that kind of reminds me of the same ilk of what you're talking about. From an education standpoint, if someone's listening and they are a restaurateur or they are in the tourism business or restaurant recreation, restaurant hospitality recreation and tourism, they're in that space and listening right now, what does actual gender equality look like in a business? So if this is a GM sitting down listening to this right now and they're in his or her office and they're like, yeah, our place is gender equal. Like, how do I know? What is my litmus test that I can run through to go, yes, I'm ticking the boxes. It is fair. It is equal. And I have that covered. What does it actually look like in practice?
I think we want to see balance, right? So it's not a 50-50. That's kind of impossible for every department to achieve that. But balance and the accessibility, you can see the role and work towards it. I think that's the beauty of hospitality and outdoor recreation, tourism, where none of us, you always hear the story of I wash dishes and now I'm the GM, and there's should be no barriers. And so that's what we want for women. We don't want them to see barriers that I can't work that job because I've never seen a female in that job. Their expectations are for me to give up my family commitments, whatever it is. So we want to allow women to see their opportunities. We want for more balanced representation in terms of leadership. And, it's no surprise to anyone listening that we know that companies that have diversity, inclusion, and female balance in their leadership, they're seeing 15 to 35% more returns in their financial.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense. You want a healthier, wealthier world, you have to have women at the table. And so there's a lot companies can be doing to kind of check the pulse of their culture and look at their leadership teams and say, how can we get more women? It always drives me crazy when I walk into a restaurant and there are, 80%. We know also tourism, hospitality, there's like 70% women working in these fields. More women are graduating with degrees and diplomas in hospitality than men. And I'll walk into a restaurant, there'll be more women there. And they're all wearing, high heels, even though that's not mandated anymore, thanks to Chrissy Clark. But they're in there holding the trays. And then all the men in ties are the ones holding the clipboard and schedules, and they're the leaders in that space. I would just love to see more balance so that we have women that are floor walkers, supervisors. There's some great examples in Whistler, Gibbons Group. They actually put 1 day a week on the schedule for women to learn how to floor walk. And so maybe they don't want to be a restaurant manager, but at least they got that taste of that responsibility. And it keeps them longer, it keeps them happier. They're more connected to the business. They're learning.
That's just more progressive.
Absolutely.
But like you said, it is and it isn't, because we're just a few steps behind as an industry as a whole. So whereas we might say something, we being the industry, being like, oh, this is so progressive, whereas other industries have been doing it for probably the last 10 years or more.
Definitely. It's just that intentional element, that commitment to saying, we see an opportunity to have more women lead in this space. And so what are we going to do about that?
Right. So it's not going, I need 5 of my 10 staff in the front of house to be women, and I need 5 of my 10 back of house staff to be men. It goes deeper than that. And it's not.
No, of course. And I think also we need to redefine what leadership looks like. And, again, back to the example of how these chefs have been permitted to behave. And that's not just chefs. That's a lot of different roles. We've just kind of
leadership.
feared these individuals. And leadership needs to be much more collaborative, nurturing, more coaching elements, more drive to develop. And that's what we'd want to see. And that doesn't take a woman in the role or a man in the role. That just takes a different attitude towards how we're running our businesses.
How much patience do you have for, I'll just out myself, like someone like me who is, again, I'm super invested in this. I want to learn more and I want to affect positive change when it comes to this topic. But how much patience do you and other women have for people like me to say, like, I'm on board and I get it. I'm learning and I'm educating myself. And it's a process for me as well, because I've been exposed to this industry for 20 plus years and I've only really known a certain way. So is there a buffer there that you're allowing for, again, this is a general sweeping statement, for men to have in this space to get more educated? Or are you like, you know what, enough is enough, like read the news and change now?
Yes, read the news and change now. No, absolutely.
I appreciate that.
I think we need to be moving faster. At the current rate right now, it will take 108 years for gender equality. The pay gap closing is hundreds of years away. We're moving too slow. The progress is too slow. I just came out of the Women Deliver conference. It was held here in Vancouver. 8,000 women and men in attendance, 165 countries represented. Gave me so much hope. I was so excited by the conference, but there were a lot of lessons there that we're just not moving fast enough. But to the conversation around men, men are born with an inherent privilege and blinders on potentially about women's lived experience. So, I served for a long time. I was a bartender. I did lots of different roles in restaurants. And men may not understand what it's like to be a woman who maybe is fearful of losing that tip or, having their manager upset with them if they ask them to intervene with creepy patrons. So men don't understand that lived experience. And so what we want to see is more men speak up. And when they see something, that's what we know. Men want equality, but they're not afraid. They are afraid to speak up when it comes down to it. So I've been in lots of situations where I've seen behaviors been permitted or allowed. Guys showing pictures on their phones to young women that
Oh
are just
God.
completely lewd. Waiters going up to the hostess stand and not just kind of asking women out, but pushing for them to take their dresses off or all these things.
What?
And restaurateurs just kind of allowing that or saying like, this is just how it goes. And so, we're trying to empower women to say it's not how it goes.
God no.
It's not acceptable. It's not just kind of that creepy guy that's worked here a long time. We just let him be a creep. No, he should not work here.
Right.
And so we're trying to empower that mindset for men and women to say the time is now to shift how it's not business as usual. We
Yeah.
need to have more conversations. And we need men part of those conversations because I think, you can't have gender equity without men, and men need gender equity too. So we want to make sure that everybody's seeing things the way we see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very easy in these situations when you're dealing with a sensitive topic like this to paint every man with a certain brush.
Of course.
So I want to advocate for all of the men that are out there right now that are making changes, that are being mindful, that are creating healthy spaces, and that are doing progressive things and allowing for women to thrive in their space and feel safe and feel comfortable. So I celebrate those men, and I'm sure you do
Definitely.
as well.
Of course. And that's very true. I think that what we're just asking for is more men to speak up and to have these conversations. And, sexual harassment in the workplace is one piece of that where, a man might think they know that there is a policy, let's say, or we don't tolerate it. But then what would they do if they saw it? And so those are the things where I know there are a lot of men working now in these spaces that are saying, absolutely not. I would kick that guy out myself. We'd evict the guest or whatever it takes. But we also want to make sure that in the first place, that policy is dusted off, and then every person knows how to report sexual harassment, who to report it to, what the actions would be, what a no retaliation policy. All those things encompass kind of a shared conversation between men and women in the workplace. And absolutely, I think that there are more men that are on side for what we're doing than there are that are kind of pushing against what we're trying to do.
I think going back to my point earlier about getting in a room and being kind of anarchist and punk rock a bit, it's great to have, again, like these conferences. It's great to have these conversations, but the proof is in the pudding, and it is like when the rubber hits the road, you have to be willing to act if you are in a leadership role and you are a man, you need to make sure that if something's inappropriate, that you actually are acting on it. And maybe it is firing that super talented bartender that just won bartender of the year 2 years ago or whatever it may be. You have to be willing to, that's the hill you should be dying on, in my opinion.
I think you're so right. And I think that I'm seeing that more and more. I will say from the HR standpoint, I believe that more employers are recognizing, what you permit, you promote. So if you're going to allow those behaviors, you're basically saying, that's fine here. We allow that. And the world I grew up in, serving tables and everything, I think it's much different now. That, I remember complaining about a group of guests, male guests, and the response was, well, they spend a lot of money here. Yeah. And so that kind of prevailing attitude is like, well, we don't want that kind of guest in our restaurant. We don't want that person here. If they're damaging this self-esteem and the engagement of our employees. So I think that's for me what's so important in 2019 and moving forward.
It comes to a knowledge piece as well. Like, how knowledgeable are you of what that costs your business? Yeah, sure, they spend a lot of money there, but what does it cost if you have all of your female staff one day just decide not to show up for work? What does that cost to your business? So I think the owners that are very aware of the true costs of the people in their space and how that far outweighs guests can come and go, but your team is so important and imperative to you being successful. So,
and one scary thing about this is that studies show that more women in hospitality will exit and leave the company than voice that they're facing harassment.
Yeah, that's scary.
It is scary, and I put myself in the shoes of 21-year-old Joanna Jagger, so excited to work at these restaurants and so excited to be a part of this team, and then I started even earlier, and I started probably 15 in certain restaurants as a cook, my first jobs. And you're working with certain individuals who are much older, maybe have kind of an influence on the floor, and you think that this is really cool, kind of they're funny, they're telling jokes, and being mindful that, this is a really formative time for young women, and there's some vulnerability there. And so what they should have in a restaurant culture is someone to look up to. And I had that. I was lucky to have a lot of men and women kind of, Uncle Jamie or whoever kind of just being really positive figures in my life in the restaurant community. But I saw a lot of stuff as I was working my way up the ranks.
Yeah, there still is a lot of stuff going on, like you said. Like we are pretty behind, but again, these conversations that we're having today, and hopefully more, will start seeing some change. And the conversation I had, I'm not sure if it was on your radar when you came to know of this podcast, but I interviewed a woman by the name of Erin Fairbanks, and she she kind of heads up with a few of her partners, Women in Hospitality, out of New York.
Yes,
I don't know if you know of that.
100%. They're amazing. They are doing a lot of great work, and we've adopted one of their things called the Solution Sprint. So they bring women together from all different. They're really focused on the restaurant community, where we have a bit of a broader reach, and tourism and kind of the golf courses and the mountain resorts or whatever. But they'll bring together women, chefs, restaurant owners, servers, bartenders, and they come up with solutions on topics that are really prevalent. So work-life balance, what are we going to actually do about that? And so we brought together a group of women at the Vancouver Club in January, really senior women, exceptionally talented ones. And we tried to do the same thing, and we're going to continue that, to have these conversations. So what are we doing about it? To your point, what is the punk rock? What is the way to really shake things up? And then how do we loop in the decision makers so that they see us demanding this change? And we've gotten the opportunity to step in front of a lot of great companies to have these conversations in our short time in existence, a lot of other associations. And, we're kind of just knocking down doors to say we're here and we're not going away. And we have some things to say about how this industry should change and what your role is in it.
One thing that Erin mentioned when we sat down and we spoke was, and it may have changed now, I'm sure it has, but she mentioned that I think it was one of their very first meetings that they had as a group. They had invited men, and a few men showed up. And she had said, and I have to go back and listen to the interview, but I remember her saying, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, that she and the rest of the women there felt it was almost too soon to have men involved. Do you feel that way with Worth, or do you feel like Worth is ready to have men? And they just felt like they didn't give themselves the room and the space to kind of discuss things they needed to discuss, and they kind of invited the male figure in a little bit too quickly.
No, we're ready to have men at the table for our conversations, on our panels. My only caveat to that is I want to see, and I would love if or anybody else knows, who are the men that we should be inviting? So who are the men that are taking an active role in promoting, accelerating women in leadership, creating safe spaces and cultures in the workplace? Those are the men we want to talk to. And we have a lot of men who come and attend our events too, which has been really neat to see, and men in the human resources space, and men in the recruitment area. So, there's probably an opportunity to have more in attendance, but certainly I think that's the point. And again, back to this lived experience, a lot of the women that are coming to our events, they've heard a lot of these themes and messages before. I don't know if the men have. I don't know if they've understood all of those barriers. And there's an invisible obstacle course for women that's very true. There's no ladder for women. There's not climbing the corporate ladder.
Right.
This is just hurdles and jumping over things that to many men and some women invisible until you get there. And then, I'm a mom of 2 kids, 4 years old, 2 years old almost. And I'm mindful of some of the hurdles that I had to jump through while pregnant, and, trying to accelerate my career as a director of HR, but then having kind of sexist comments by general managers. I had one gentleman, a senior hotelier, say, you shouldn't concern yourself with any of the decisions of the hotel, because pretty soon you'll be off eating bonbons and watching Oprah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And first of all, don't bring Oprah into this. She did
Poor
nothing
Oprah.
wrong. She's been off air for years. But I had that moment of saying, I can't even believe this. I'm an executive on your team.
Did you call him out?
Oh, absolutely,
Oh,
I
good
did.
girl.
The person you don't want to mess with is the person
The
sitting in your
who's,
HR
who's
seat,
pregnant.
pregnant, and knows her human rights law real well.
Yeah.
So, no, absolutely. And that's what it takes. I think that, I don't want to say it's confidence, but I think it's learned experience that you do call these things out and you do shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And, there may be jokes in the workplace that you hear, and it doesn't have to be this, intervention of sorts. It can just be something you say, I don't think that meant to land the way it did
Mm-hmm.
to, the guy that shows you some kind of perverted thing on his phone. Like just having that backbone to say, nah, this is not appropriate.
Yeah, and I feel like through Worth Association and things like Women in Hospitality, you guys are supplying tools to these women to be like, oh, this is how I can react or should react, or maybe this would help and not create maybe something that doesn't need to be created, but at least getting your message across that this isn't appropriate, this isn't right. I'm not comfortable with you saying those things. It happened actually just with my partner yesterday, who's she has her own bookkeeping business, and she happened to be on site with a client, and they made just a lewd comment about her outfit that she was wearing, and I was so taken aback by this is still the world that we live in, that
Yes.
this is still happening. And obviously as her partner, I become a little bit protective and I do those things. But as a man, I'm just like, come on, guys. Like, it's 2019. Like, are we still like commenting on women's like low cut shirts and like whatever it may be? Like, can we
Right.
not just carry on and allow for them just to be in the space with us without feeling like they're being judged or stared at or whatever it may be?
Of
I mean, again,
course.
we could speak hours and hours about this. It's not just this industry, and it's not just this
Yes.
conversation today. It's everything from how women are treated in their own homes sometimes and in their families and
Definitely.
all of those things. So
Yeah, we're trying to make sure that men are part of the conversation. But you may have heard that a year ago, 32% of men were hesitant to mentor women, and now that number is 60% after all of these allegations and the Harvey Weinstein and all that stuff. And we're just saying, there's nobody needs to be fearful. It's how do you hold yourself accountable to your professional behavior at the end of the day?
Yeah.
And so if you're going to say things about what women are wearing, or you're going to be a creep, or you're going to be, you should just not be in the workplace. You should just not be in a position of power if you cannot control yourself to be a professional. And so, and that is itself kind of a form of harassment, saying I'm not going to mentor a woman. So,
oh yeah.
we have to have men that are really a part of this conversation and really seeing the experience of women and kind of amplifying, not empowering, not, advocating, not cheerleading, just amplifying their voice, allowing them to contribute their ideas, looking at the leadership styles and applauding it, and allowing or encouraging, I should say, more women to stretch themselves. And I think that's a big piece to what holds some women back is their own self-imposed barriers. I would have been very nervous in my younger days in restaurants to be that floor walker once a week. I know I could have done that, but I would have overthought that, and I would have been maybe held myself back because of my own fears and insecurities. And so sometimes you just need to tap someone on the shoulder and say, yeah, you're ready for this. I'm going to throw you in. I'm going to stretch you on this assignment. You're doing inventory today, or like you're carrying that damn keg, like whatever it takes to just push women into an area where they're thriving in the workplace.
Can we just role play a bit with the keg situation? Because I feel like that one is such a slippery slope, and it's so easy for me because if I was in the space, I'd be like, oh no, don't worry about it. I got it, Joanna, I'll get it for you. And I feel like that in itself could be like, whoa, Brad, like I can clearly do it. But for me, I would call myself being chivalrous and like
Right.
helping you out and like not, maybe I'm a little bit stronger than you, so I should do it. But what does that look like in that exact scenario where traditionally a man is stronger than a woman traditionally? But I need to give you the opportunity to attempt this piece of work. So like, how do I do that and not feel like I'm not being chivalrous? Like, how do I navigate a situation like that?
Right. I think that's just, the restaurant industry itself is so collaborative, and we're definitely a team. You start every shift with we're a team.
Yes.
We're in this
Yeah.
together. We're in the trenches. And so I think for a situation like that is just, would you like me to give you a hand?
Right.
Do you need a hand? And asking for that permission to give someone assistance in any capacity. That's why we say, may I speak, chef, and all these things.
Yeah.
There's a permission-based thing of saying, can I support you? I think that would be how myself, I would like to see that interaction. For other women, it may be different. Other women may, be throwing it over her shoulder and not care at all what you think. Get out of my way, Brad. So yeah, I would, and I don't think we have to be so sensitive to things like that. I think it's that's what we don't want. We don't want men to be kind of walking on eggshells at all. As because of these conversations, we want it to be really that women are able to kind of design the role itself so that they're comfortable and fulfilled and excited about what they're doing and never feeling kind of, it's a terrible thing to go into your workplace and feel ill-equipped, unsafe, fearful. So all of those things, if you can be supportive of your coworkers, that's the best place to work.
Yeah, I feel like if you think of the leaps that we've made, and obviously there's still a ton of work with things like race relations in our society, just treating everyone like you would treat everyone else, like whether it was a man, woman, black, white, whatever. I think that in itself goes a very, very long way.
Absolutely.
So whether they have the Y chromosome or not, treat everyone the exact same. Agreed?
Agreed. And it's really building that culture, and that's where your leadership comes in, where you're intentional about what you're growing and how does it feel when they walk. Patrons know how it feels when they walk into your space.
Oh my God, yeah.
So it's a lot harder to retain people in this industry. Our turnover rate is like 26% annually. It's absurd. So it's harder on the owner, operator, general manager, but in a way it's not that difficult to create a really positive working environment. And that's where I do HR consulting and I teach HR at university. And it's globally, we're having this shift on how people feel in the workplace. And it is all about positivity and respect and empowering individuals to do their best work while they're with you.
Is there anything else that you feel we should discuss right now? I know that you have
so much.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, but
I could talk about this forever.
I don't want to skip over anything. I don't want to miss anything with my questions. So, is there anything else that you feel is poignant that needs to be heard right here, right now on this podcast?
I would love for your listeners to connect with us on Instagram at worth.association, see what we're up to, check out our website, because that's where you'll find kind of these tools and resources. And we are growing, and this is something a lot of passionate women on our board and myself were building with input from women. We want to know, we're listening, what needs to be done in these spaces and how can we best support. And so, I mentioned the events we have coming up. We're raising money for scholarships for young women entering the industry. And so, if Worth and our mission to educate, elevate, and empower women is something that is on your radar, we're always looking for partners and sponsors and support and women to get involved and help us grow this network, because we would like to see more events and more conversations happen and more advocacy efforts in that way.
I love it. This podcast, like I said before we turn the microphones on, is never a scripted podcast. So the questions that I ask are truly a discovery. So we've covered that point, that aspect. Now I have for you the scripted questions that you may have heard if you listened to the podcast before, or maybe you haven't. So there are two questions that I ask every single guest, and it allows for me and listeners to better understand you as a person, but also maybe take away some more actionable items, if you will, for us to move forward with the information you shared today. So the first question I have for you, Joanna, is the half a dozen have-tos. So what I need from you is 1 to 6 items that you feel like listeners have to do. Something you've experienced in your life, whether it's in line with what we're here talking about today or not. It could be a meal you've had, a trip you've taken, a book you've read, a conference you've attended. What are 1 to 6 items that you feel like our listeners have to do?
Oh, this is good. 1, I feel we need more wallet feminists. So getting out there and paying for dining experiences where women are the chefs, for example, or businesses run by women. You have to do that. That's number 1.
I like that one. I've never heard that. What'd you call it again?
Wallet feminist. Yeah,
wallet feminist.
It's a good principle that we need, to. And you should be always just paying for businesses that resonate with your values. But for me, I'd love to see more women jumping into running their own restaurants, and there's a lot of women in the city that have beautiful spaces and great restaurants that we should support.
Totally.
2, we go to a Florence and the Machine concert.
Oh, okay.
I think
When
that's
did you? When
transformative.
and where did you see Florence and her machines?
She was at Skookum recently in Vancouver, I guess last year. I'm such a big fan. I'll just listen to her on repeat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, some
Is
good
there a
anthems
certain
there.
track?
I think "Shake It Off" would be one of my
Okay.
favorites. Yeah, I think she's just a really powerful, amazing musician, and I feel like people who haven't kind of experienced her music should definitely listen to her. She's phenomenal and
Yeah.
beautiful and powerful live, and I've never seen concerts like that. She was actually at first time I saw her was Deer Lake Park, and now
awesome
she's
venue.
just blown up,
Yeah.
and so I'd follow her all around the world. A restaurant experience, I think, is a have-to for everybody. Speaking to Wallet Feminist, Melissa Craig at Barefoot Bistro in Whistler. Have you been to
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
It's such an amazing space. I was lucky. I got married in Whistler 7 years ago or so, and I went there just for a break with my husband to get away from it all. And we savored champagne and we ate oysters. And
Oh,
there's that.
that's quite the break you guys
It was,
had.
oh yeah, just
I thought it was
leave it
like a
all.
glass of water or something.
Oh no. We just took off just for like that time of I don't know. Going through the wedding is such an intense
Yes,
day. It's
yes.
easy to not even see your partner on that
Yeah.
day. So, yeah, I have special memories there, but I also think they do beautiful food and cool experiences with the vodka room and all
Yeah,
that.
so cool.
And another have-to that I think all of us need to get behind is having a vegan friend or having
Yeah.
somebody in our life that's vegan to kind of support if you're not vegan.
Who's that for you?
I have two. I have Lindsay from
Okay,
the
yeah,
Talent Marketing.
yeah.
I have Catherine Graham, and these two friends have really transformed the way I see food and eat food, and looking to kind of plant-based options.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up with really talented. My mom is an amazing cook and a lot of good food in my life, but I'm completely transforming the way I see and eat. So
I'm going to shout out, if I can, my friend Darren Macy, running on Real Food, who actually just launched her ebook today. It is the 11th of June, so head over to my Instagram. Excuse me, head over to Instagram. You can get it there as well.
awesome! And you have this cool plant-based dinner coming up.
Yeah, this will actually air. This will actually air just before it.
Great.
It's sold out, which is
Awesome.
amazing. But we're heading to. I've been putting it all over my social medias. People have heard it all the time. But heading out to Abbotsford, we're having dinner at a long table, 60 people, all plant-based from an Australian chef, and it's going to be fantastic. All of the proceeds, all of the money goes to the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. I didn't know this before I engaged with the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, but if you give them $1, it turns into $3. Like, that is the coolest math ever when it comes to affecting positive change with food in our city. So if you have money to give and you're out there listening, consider the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, because they impact families in our city and put food into mouths that can't afford it, which is amazing. But
That is
I'm
amazing.
taking over your
No,
have to.
I think
Sorry.
what you're doing is what we're trying to do too. It's like all of your events and activities, what are you giving back? And that's for us scholarships. And for you work with a lot of local organizations. And I think that's an important part of what we need to do to kind of, again, reach back. And
Yeah, I think the power of the law of reciprocity is a real thing. I don't know if you know what that's all about, but basically,
Yes.
like, the more you give, the more you get, essentially, for lack of a better term. And it was never my intention with this dinner series for it to be just that. But oh my God, like, the people I've met and the connections I've made and what it's done for me personally and my business, all of those things is just, I can't even put a number on it. So it's amazing. Just through the act of arranging these dinners, bringing people together to have conversation, and then seeing the change that it impacts is absolutely amazing. So thank you for allowing me to kind of shamelessly plug myself on my own podcast.
I think it's wonderful what you're doing. And especially this podcast, this is great to engage the community. And there's a lot of really fabulous people doing great work. So I think what you're doing is awesome.
No, I'm very lucky to kind of be that canvas for people. Any other have-tos?
Working now at the university level and seeing my students kind of get excited about tourism, hospitality, I think for all of us, it's just kind of continuous learning. So if there's a course you're putting off or a book or, you haven't purchased yet or a podcast you haven't listened to, I think we're in such a powerful time of having knowledge at our fingertips.
Oh,
we should
God, it's
really
crazy. It's amazing.
engage. And I think that's for me. It's just to have to. I always want to be a lifelong learner, and I put off doing this master's in leadership for years and years and years, and I'm so glad I did it. So I think that's my have to.
Amazing. I like that one. Yeah. If I hear anyone out there say they're bored in 2019, I just shake my head. I'm like, how are you bored? Like, go learn a language. Go read a book, either don't read it. Just put your earphones in and listen to it. Like there's just so much information out there, and things are so accessible right now. I had
Yes.
someone ask me the other day, if you could live in any time, past or present, when would you live? I'm like, right now. Like the we have a lot of issues, like the one we're talking about today, but I'm not going to die at 35. And there are major leaps and bounds that science has made and technology, all these things. So yeah, I'm very happy and feel very blessed to be 37 years old in 2019, which is really cool. Any more have-tos?
No, I think that's my have-to list.
Amazing. Next, same kind of ilk is the half a dozen haven't yet. So kind of your bucket list, if you will. So things that you haven't experienced that you want to experience. It sounds like you've done a lot. You've been to a lot of cool concerts. You've had some pretty cool dining experiences. You facilitate a lot of great conversations. But what is on your list that you still have yet to do?
Well, I'm really fortunate that I did a lot of traveling young. And so, even when I was talking about that high school chef experience, I was able to, at 14 or something, we were in Costa Rica, and then I went to Fiji and the Cook Islands. So
Oh,
some people
wow.
were going on like volleyball trips to Vancouver Island. The culinary arts team, we were going all over the world, and that really instilled this just love of tourism and travel. And so I've been on 6 continents, and I've just been me and my backpack on my own for some of it with my very good friend for a year we took off. But that always just eats at me, just the places yet to see. But one thing I would love to do is to go back to Africa with my family one day. My husband hasn't seen it. It's a really special place that I think stays with you. I did my university exchange in Cape Town, so there's a lot of Africa I haven't seen, and I'd love to get to that for sure. And then, one thing that I've been thinking about since this conference is that 1 in 2 young women will drop out of sports around the time of kind of puberty, where they just get this confidence shaken and they get nervous about sports. And what we know is that sports for women is actually a leadership accelerator. You could learn about risk, and you learn about failure, and you learn all these things. And so I am that textbook girl that didn't really follow through with anything athletic. So I have this have-to. I want to say like Joanna plays this. And so
Okay.
I haven't figured. It might be tennis, it might be something else. But I'm like myself. I'm 35, looking at how am I going to learn a sport. But that's on the have-to list.
Awesome. Well, the tennis court's right here behind the camera. So there are ample tennis courts in our city.
Okay.
Actually, have you seen the new volleyball courts? This is not for anyone. Sorry, not for anyone that's not from Vancouver, but the new Concord Pacific Park downtown.
Yes.
They put a volleyball court in there with sand. It's beautiful down there.
Right. Okay,
So,
that could be my have-to.
Yeah, I feel like you've got like the limbs for volleyball.
The height, but
Yeah.
I could give it a try. I think that's what it's all about, just trying it,
Yes,
not being
I love
afraid of
that.
trying it,
Yeah.
even if I'm so awkward, not
Just
very
doing it.
athletic at all.
Just do it.
Another thing my have to is with worth. I think if I say it out loud, I'll make it happen, and I have to make worth a conference date and book a conference date and host a summit and bring women and men to the conversation provincially and have a dialogue so that we can leave women with kind of the tools that they need. Again, if I don't say it out loud, I won't do it. So
Can we?
have a conference.
I like to hold my guests' feet to the fire sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have a date that this should be done by? Will be done
2020. We'll think
2020?
2020 will be the year that we do.
by? Okay, so that's arguably in 6 months.
Yeah.
But we'll give you the whole year. So we'll give you 18 months.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll
so
get it done.
We'll do round 2 of the podcast the day before the conference.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have some really exceptional women who are on this board with amazing talents, and I know that they're the ones that are saying we can do this. Let's make it happen. So
Heck
I
yeah.
love that. I love that deadline, and I like we have the right people. We're looking for more people to get involved, men and women. So that would be.
Well, let me know when it
Yeah.
is. I'd love to support it and use my platform to help kind of
Thank
fly
you.
that flag.
I appreciate that. And then I guess the last thing that I would be a have to is I'd like to learn how to read tarot cards.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
What about it?
I've had some readings. I go annually to have a reading with somebody in Granville Island, and I've seen people kind of develop this skill. I find I don't have really a spiritual outlet, and I think there's something really magic about the tarot card experience. I don't know. I'll leave you with that kind of bizarre one.
Have you bared witness to these annual readings becoming realities? Have they manifested themselves?
100%.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been
Crazy.
pretty powerful. And I think, it's anything, some people will be so skeptic about it.
That's okay.
But I think there's something really powerful about just kind of doing a pulse check of where you're at, where you're going, and if somebody needs, you're paying someone to kind of illustrate that through imagery and symbols, so be it. But
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I've had some really incredible experiences with that, and then I've had some duds, but at the same time, it's to learn that language it would be interesting to me.
Very, very cool. Joanna, I want to take a second to celebrate you. I want to say thank you so much, first and foremost, for coming onto the podcast. It can be a very nerve-wracking thing. You said it was your very first one, but you crushed it. You did so well. And I want to thank you for doing what you do, for linchpinning what is such an important conversation, and for being the lead with, obviously, your team, with Worth Association, helping educate people like me, men and women, of what should be going on in our space and what hopefully will become our reality in the not too distant future. So thank you so much for doing what you do. I will continue as best I possibly can to support you and Worth Association. So please let me know how I can do that. And if you're out there listening, as Joanna said, you can follow them on Instagram at worth.association, and you can keep up to date on any information there. Tools, tricks, all the information on their website, and look out for that conference next year.
Sounds good.
If you are local, June 24th is the next event, which is what again?
Negotiate Your Worth. We're holding that at a law firm boardroom. And so you can really feel that power being at the table. And then, of course, Yes Chef comes up on
In
August 12th.
at Shambar, which is a great restaurant here locally, and that's a ticketed event.
Yes. And so information's on our website. You can see who the chefs and sommeliers who are in attendance. I think you'll be impressed by our lineup.
Amazing. If you guys are local, again, please do engage with those events. If you aren't local, do engage with them online. I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in as you do week after week. I truly appreciate your support. I am Brad. That is Joanna. This is the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. You know what to do until next time. Be good and do good.